Directed by Sam Peckinpah, ladies and gentlemen. Of course, that won't mean anything to you if you're watching on YouTube. One of the virtually everybody watches this show, watches it on YouTube. But if you didn't see it live, we usually have, in fact, we always have a pre-show musical selection, and there were a lot of requests for Convoy, and I didn't have time to convert my own copy of Convoy, which I, needless to say, have on my phone, as every good American does. I think that's really all the ID check you really should ever need in this country, to be honest with you. So I ran streamed the trailer for the movie, which, or I guess it was a music video for the movie. I don't remember ever hearing those words. The second I heard that they were not the original lyrics, I was kind of disappointed. And then I realized, hey, here's a chance to hear some new stuff. Yeah, just since somebody was calling for it, let me give you a little heads up about what happened there with those CB radio days. And we'll just consider this to be like a tiny miniature of what we saw. I don't remember the exact year, but it must have been after 76 because Jimmy Carter was president, and he had, after the Arab oil embargo in 72 or 73, I remember lining up to buy gas because OPEC and the Arab nations basically just shut off the supply. And I think I mentioned 73. Thanks, Dave. I think I mentioned once before the subject came up that I want to say about 3 months before the oil embargo, my dad bought a 1972 or 73 Mercury Marquis station wagon, blue, with hidden headlights and woody side panels. And then the Arab oil embargo hit, and you couldn't get any gas for love or money. And my dad came home one day and said, I just discovered that I have purchased the car with the worst miles per gallon rating ever sold in this country. 7 miles per gallon is what that car got. 7. So that was kind of the setting. That happened before Carter was president. I don't know when the speed limit change happened. It's got to have been under Carter. It's the kind of thing Carter would do. Turn your thermostats down to 65 and put on a sweater, and no driving any faster than 55 mile an hour speed limit. Now, there's just, oh wow, sorry to interrupt the story. Apparently, CP Tomes is telling me Burgess asked 5,000 people if they'd seen my Apollo special. I'm assuming that CP is coming to us live from the AirVenture show at Oshkosh. Bert was great. I'll talk about that very briefly in a second. Back to the oil embargo. So anyway, in an effort to save fuel, before the companies could start manufacturing, fuel efficient cars, and this, by the way, has really got what got the Japanese car industry off really flying. Prior to that, it was just kind of a novelty. But then all of a sudden, nobody could buy any gas, and so cars with good gas mileage got people's attention, and that's how Toyota got started, and what was formerly Datsun, which became Nissan, and so on and so on and so on. Anyway, here's where the fun begins. I got to find out real quick so I can just tell this story somewhat coherently. This will be very quick. Just consider this your Dead Air episode. Okay, come on. 1975. Okay, that sounds just about right. So, in any event, this song came out before Jimmy Carter, and I don't know if it came out before the 55 mile an hour speed limit. 75 would have been President Ford. But anyway, during the entire years, the 70s and probably back into the 60s, truck drivers on American highways had been using CB radio. That stands for Citizens Band Radio. And CB, Citizens Band Radio, was basically a set of frequencies set aside by the FCC for really just anybody to use. And they didn't have tremendous range, a couple miles, 3 or 4 or 5 miles at the most or something. But long before the internet ever occurred, this was a way for people to be in constant, instant communication with each other. And truck drivers had been using CB radio forever. And they've been using the CB radio to do things like avoid the speed traps. So if you're going to have to do this whole country at 55 miles an hour, and anybody who's ever driven across the country at 85 miles an hour will tell you that the traveling 55 on the interstate highway system, it just feels like you could walk faster than that. And it was hugely unpopular. Everybody hated it. One of the things it brought into the world was radar detectors. I remember we went once from my home in Miami up to school where I was at the University of Florida. A friend of mine was driving, and he had a radar detector pointed forward, one pointing backward, and we were really risking it by pushing to 65, on the Florida Turnpike, which you could land, not just the space shuttle, you could land every single space shuttle landing that ever occurred and still have half the state left. It's the most boring drive on planet Earth, the Florida Turnpike. It really is. But the actual part of this that I think is kind of cool is this song came out in 1975, the version of Convoy that I didn't play, but the one that everybody knows. And I don't remember if there was FM radio then. If there was, it was just starting to come in. What I do remember is this. In 1975, kids, you got to understand now, not kidding about this, you didn't have music on demand. You had to listen to the radio, and whatever the DJ played on the radio is what you would hear. You didn't have music on demand for at least another 7 or 8 years or so when the Walkman came along. And it took a while to press a record and stuff. So this song broke in 1975. I remember it really, really clearly. And that song, I want to say for at least 2 or 3 weeks, they played that song every 15 minutes. It was every third song. Every third song was Convoy. People just couldn't get enough of it. It just was, it's a phenomenon, the likes of which I don't think I've ever seen. Convoy was just unbelievable. It was just perfect for the time, and people were sick of, it was really, 1975, 76, 77, when I was in high school, that was really America at its lowest. We're still 5 years before the Iranian hostage crisis. We just gotten out of Vietnam, and we couldn't do anything right. It was a terrible, depressing time. And so now we've got to, line up for gas, and it's like even numbered license plates on Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and odd numbers on Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday, or whatever the case may be. And it just was very un-American. It was just wrong. You just have to go and spend an hour and a half, 2 hours in line to get gas. And since your car's running during the time you have to get the gas, you burn half the gas you had anyway. It's just terrible. But the thing about Convoy that was so cool, and is still cool, it remains cool to this day, I could make a decent case for making Convoy the national anthem. I really could. What that song is about, the version that everybody knows, the version from the radio. And I don't know of any other country that not only has ever done this, I can't think of another country that would consider doing this. That entire song, one song, led to every single person in America buying a CB radio. It just was unbelievable. They just couldn't make them fast enough. And all of the people who used to be driving down the freeways at normal speed are now doing 55, and they can't bear it. And there's no, they're not monitoring you on GPS. The only way they can get you to drive 55 is by issuing a lot of tickets. So the cops in Florida Highway Patrol would be in various places, usually hidden, and they'd have their radar guns, and they'd point down the highway, and they'd tag somebody. It'd be like watching a shark, pull an individual seal out of a pack of them or whatever seals swim in. And so people bought CB radios, and we started communicating to each other where everybody would tell everybody else where the speed traps were, so that everybody could go fast enough to be feeling like you're going someplace in America. Mostly it was on the interstates, on the freeways. Like people mess around with them in town. It didn't do much good in town, but on the freeways, everybody had them. Everybody, and all of the song, all of the lyrics in the songs, obviously written. C.W. McCall either was a trucker at one point or spent some time with him, because, and this is cool too. Everybody in the country started using CB language, and nobody had ever heard any of it before or after that one song. It was, it's like the song delivered this whole thing wrapped in a bow, and every single American I knew opened it. And so all of a sudden, people who've never heard of CB radio before are using the CB radio code. 10-4 is affirmative, 10-20 is your destination. So everybody's driving, you're driving down the road in your Ford Pinto, and it's like, 10-4, good buddy, and you come up with some kind of ridiculous name, and well, what's your 20? And it's like, oh, we're heading to, we would say Orlando, which would probably be, I don't know, Mouseville or something. There's a great line in the beginning of Convoy. We were heading for Bear on I-10, Interstate 10, about a mile out of Shaky Town. That's Los Angeles as Shaky Town. But the part, again, I keep kind of circling around this thing. The part about it was location, not destination. Thank you, Mark. The part about it that was so cool is that song was so unbelievably popular, and the song is just one 3-minute incitement to insurrection. It's just one 3-minute long gigantic pitch to basically disobey the law openly, just openly. And that's why I love that song and why I think it'd be a great national anthem, because it is about rebellion against unreasonable government restrictions, and it captured it, really, really captured it, and that's why people loved it so much. It just arrived. It parachuted out of the sky in 1975, and for 4, 5, 6 years, at least, maybe longer, much longer, in fact, it changed the country. Somebody mentioned earlier, I didn't get to see the name. It was Hascat. Said the truckers hated that song with a passion because they used to have the frequencies all to themselves, and they're professional drivers. And next thing you know, they can't get any word in or out because everybody is using this thing trying to sound like real truckers. Let me think about just trying to remember that one line I like so much from that. Anyway, it's the very last line in the song is, they got the longer the convoy goes, the bigger it gets. The bigger it gets, the more police they pull out to try and stop this convoy. They've got a line of barricades on a state line. And the last 2 lines of the song are, so we crashed the gate doing 98. I said, let them truckers roll 10-4. And it's like, yeah, man, it was an entire industry, radar detectors, all of this stuff, an industry determined to make sure that you had some decent chance to break the law, which to me is, I just think that's incredibly American. I don't think they should be selling aids to break the laws against rape and murder and arson. But in a country that is a continent, 55 miles an hour is not feasible. And furthermore, in terms of saving fuel, it's like, look, fuel, whatever fuel cost, it got a lot more expensive, and they were rationing it and all the rest. But the point is, if you drove a Mercury Marquis station wagon and you were getting 7 miles to the gallon and you're paying through the ears, your eyes are bleeding, you're paying so much money on gas, that should be your right. That should be your right. You should have the right it doesn't matter who pays for the gallon of gas. It doesn't matter. A gallon of gas is a gallon of gas. And if you want to spend your money on it and drive at a reasonable speed, then off you go. There was a time in this country, I want to say it ended probably in the 80s, maybe as late as the 90s, when there were parts of the country, my understanding is Nevada, which makes sense, and maybe West Texas or something, a couple places, where there was no speed limit. It was, you could drive as fast as you wanted to. My understanding is that the Autobahn is that way or was that way. Yeah, Reagan, little discussion here. Some question about one of our regulars said that thought Reagan gave us the 55-mile-an-hour speed limit, but no, it was either Carter or Ford. And when Reagan was elected, you want to talk about make America great again. That was, air traffic controller strike, boom, just out of the gate. Reagan was just like, oh, I remember what we are. I remember what we are now. This is America. Of course, I hated him at the time because I was in college and I was an idiot. But you could feel it in the air. The Air Traffic Controllers Union was a public sector union, and even FDR said that public sector should not be able to go on strike because there's no alternative. Well, the Air Traffic Controllers Union, was called PATCO at the time, said, oh, too bad, we're going on strike. And Reagan, who had been in office, I want to say he'd been inaugurated for, I don't know, 2 weeks, maybe something like that. Right at the beginning of his presidency, Reagan said, you signed a contract. The contract says you do not have the right to strike because you are federal employees. And if you decide to go on strike on this day, I'm going to fire every single one of you. I'm going to fire every single air traffic controller that doesn't come to work that day. And I don't know how many people, but hundreds certainly, of these air traffic controllers thought he was bluffing. He can't shut down the national airspace system. You can't just shut down every single plane in the country. You can't just shut that down. He's bluffing. Well, that day came along, and PATCO went on strike, and Reagan fired every single person that didn't come to work that day. And he just, and air traffic shut down. It really just crawled. They grabbed a lot of guys out of the Air Force and a lot of controllers, and they hired a bunch of new people and trainees and brought back former controllers. But Reagan basically said he was going to do this, and he did it. And well after the Cold War ended, in the 90s, when we got a chance to see, Soviet records, KGB records and stuff. David Booty got it just as I was saying it. When they realized that Reagan was going to shut down his own country's national airspace and take that enormous commercial hit and all the political hit because he was standing up for a principle, that got the attention of the American watchers in the Kremlin. And that's why Reagan was so well able to deal with the Soviets, because they knew that he said he was going to do something, he was going to do it. And that's the benefit of having morals and standards and all the rest of it. So, Pigpen, Eric Blake is filling in some stuff for us. That's the line I like, yeah. While we laid a strip for the Jersey Shore, prepared to cross the line, I could see that the bridge was lined with bears. For those of you not from here, the term bears was applied to policemen because highway patrolmen, not city policemen. Highway patrolmen had that really bizarre completely flat brim hat that you see on Army drill or Marine Corps drill instructors, and it's on Smokey the Bear. Smokey the Bear is our national, prevent forest fires mascot. You don't see much of him anymore either. But these very, very absolutely razor flat rimmed hats. Smokey the Bear was wearing one of those things, so they kept calling the cops bears. Yeah, but this is the part I'm so glad Eric copied it, because this is the part I was really looking for. I could see that the bridge was lined with bears, but I didn't have a doggone dime. I says, Pigpen, this here is the rubber duck. We just ain't going to pay no toll. So we crashed the gate doing 98. I said, let them truckers roll 10-4. It's fabulous. It's fabulous. It's great. Yeah, they call them Smokies too sometimes. Anyway, it's an amazing thing, isn't it? A country whose citizens obey the law, unless it's a stupid law, in which case they not only break the law, but they break it enthusiastically. So, yeah, I'm glad. I'll see if I can get the do the conversion on the actual song, and then we can put it in the rotation for the opening music. But people were calling for it in the comments section just before we opened, and I just grabbed first thing I find off of YouTube. Okay, let's see. There was one other thing I was going to talk about. We have not. This is our first chance to meet since Apollo 11. What we saw, final part, because we did a Stratosphere Lounge last week on Friday night because of pressure of getting everything done for that. And so we did the Stratosphere Lounge on Friday night, and then on Saturday, last Saturday was the 20th. It was the anniversary, and we opened up with part 4, which I just loved it. I know that's a horrible thing. You're not supposed to say that, but I just did. I don't know where it came from. I mean, those 4 episodes together, in terms of total words on the page, came to 38 firewalls. And I missed 4 of them, and I'm going to miss 1 this week, so that's 5 or 6. But it was 38 firewalls worth of writing in that thing. And the guys over there at Daily Wire just did such a great job, and the editors did a great job and put in a bunch of stuff that I hadn't even seen. I say Ranger's about to crash in the moon, and the next thing you know, you hear the progress of the Ranger rocket is designed to. It was great. It was great. But we got a chance to do part 4, and certainly the series is the best thing I've ever done, and I think part 4 is clearly the best part of that series, especially at the end when I get past. I knew I was going to have 10 or 15 minutes to kind of wrap this whole thing up. Once I got past the missions that I had to cover, I didn't have to cover them, but so you get the Apollo 11 for the first half an hour, then Apollos 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, a little bit of Skylab, a little bit of Space Shuttle, and then I got a chance to kind of freestyle, I guess. And I was really quite surprised and very, very pleased that it ended with the challenge to young people and a kind of an affirmation of millennials, because as you well know, I have not been terribly kind to that generation, but it's exactly true the story is true the way I told it. When I heard the Falcon Heavy, the crowd that was in there in the Falcon Heavy were all in their 20s or 30s, and they were just screaming at the top of their lungs, because everybody's cheering, but we've seen stage separation before. We've seen second stage on Falcon flights. We'd seen the fairing go. We'd seen all of that, but the one thing we had, and we'd seen individual boosters come down and land, and all of this was impressive, but it came to us in little doses, over the course of 4 or 5 years. When those 2 boosters came down together, I just said, this is the future. This is the future. And when that shot hit the screen, because people have been cheering during the entire descent, but when you saw them both in frame, landing on the pad, people it's like they kicked that roar into afterburner. And when it was clear that after the smoke had settled, that they were standing up, that it was a successful recovery, they just went ballistic. And I thought, when I first saw SpaceX's broadcasts, I'll just be honest with you, it kind of pissed me off a little bit. It's like, dude, you're on camera for a space mission here. You don't have to wear a T-shirt for this. Can you put on a tie or something? And then it's like, no, they can't. They thank you very much, Liolis. Sorry, it's hard for me to pronounce. That's very kind of you. But they're going to do it, and then of course in the launch of the Red Roadster and all of that, and that's kind of where I ended up, and that kind of dare to future generations. I got a little teary eyed over that. It was really nice, and if it had been a year or 2 earlier, I think it would have ended on a much darker note. But anyway, Apollo's behind me. My friend Fritz Bronner, who's also a space nut, and he's mentioned briefly in part 3, one of the guys that used to go to the youth fair and do our astronaut training with. I want to say this would be back in 80, 88, 87, somewhere in there. Maybe a little before that. Fritz had made a game, a board game, called Liftoff. And you could play one of 4 characters. You could play the Russians, the Americans, the Chinese, or the Europeans. And Liftoff was a game where you had to decide how you were going to go to the moon. And it was brilliant. Brilliant. You would develop a booster and you'd spend research points on this, and then and the higher you got it developed, you would have to roll for the reliability. And the question is, the whole thing was such a great game because you had to decide at what point you were ready to take the risk. So you're spending all of these research points, and the more first you get, the more prestige points you get, so the more you get to spend. And then the question is, all right, I've got a booster that's at 88%. Do I want to spend another 4 or 5? Do I want to spend my entire year's budget getting that thing up to 93%, or do I want to take a risk on the 88%? And it was just a great game. He's re-releasing it, and it was one of the very first. In fact, it was the first video game ever to use captured video footage in a screen. They did a video game version of it called Buzz Aldrin's Race to Space. Barris. Buzz Aldrin's Race into Space. And it was and remains a terrific, terrific game. So, needless to say, I sent Fritz the Apollo stuff. And then yesterday, he sent me a text, which just depressed me so much. And then I just kind of thought about it, and I realized it's probably didn't make much of a difference, I guess. I don't know if anybody else has heard about this. I had not heard it before. He sent me a text that said that it had just been revealed, like the day before, that when Neil Armstrong died in 2012, he died due to complications of a botched surgery, that he was in for something relatively minor, and the hospital screwed up, and it killed him, and that there's a settlement going on finally, which 50 years later. I had not heard that. It doesn't sound like a rumor. I don't know why a rumor like that would wait 50 years. I try to keep my head to the ground, ear to the ground regarding space program stuff, and I'd never heard anything about it. But he said, "No, I'll just read it verbatim." He knows. And Dave Big Booty beat me to the punch, because when I heard this, I thought, God, that is just so bloody awful. And then Dave Big Booty said what I thought the second after I realized that. He said George Washington was killed by his own doctors too. Hey, Rubber City Rebel, I'm not familiar with that name too often. $6 million settlement, big settlement just announced, just settled. I keep saying 50 years after he died. No, 5 years after he died. That's kind of reasonable for a lawsuit. So that's probably not going to shed much more light on what we already had here. Neil Armstrong died by botched surgery in recovery. Wrongful death settlement revealed. So I thought, if that hadn't happened, would he be alive today? Would he be alive to see it? And I realized chances are probably not. He looked like he was in very good health, but when you're in your late 80s, early 90s, it's ever. It was tragic, but I assume it was painless. And Bo Monday mentions something here that I thought too. It's like, how would you like to be the guy who killed Neil Armstrong? I'm pretty sure he didn't do it on purpose. And ultimately, that's how I got comfortable with it. It's like, when I heard it, I thought, son of a bitch. If that hadn't happened, maybe I would have had a chance to meet him. But the whole point of the program was reality comes at you the way it comes at you, and you just have to accept it. And I'm sure he was just unconscious and just kind of slipped away. And accidents in surgery and happen, and doctors make mistakes, and so do test pilots. I know how heartbroken Bert was, and a lot of other people were too, when the Virgin Galactic Spaceship Two broke up in flight in over Mojave several years ago, and and that was just plain pilot error. It's all there is to it. He simply did the wrong. He was probably so excited when they lit the thing that he had his hand on this lever to unlock the tail so they could feather the tail, and he just pulled it 20, 30 seconds too early. So that mistake won't be made again, and it cost that guy his life. But that mistake won't be made again. And you don't know what mistakes you're not going to make until you make them. That's the price you pay. Yeah, somebody pointed out Bill Paxton died recently. He was young. Paxton played Fred Hayes on Apollo 13, and Paxton was really good in Big Love on HBO. And needless to say, Paxton was my favorite part of my favorite movie. So I miss him a lot too. It's very young, it seems to me, for Bill Paxton. Buzz is still around. There's a picture of the surviving astronauts, the surviving Apollo astronauts, not just the moonwalkers. And I want to say it's about 10 or 12 guys, and everybody's in a tuxedo. Everybody's in a black tuxedo, but Buzz is in a silver tuxedo. And his socks, one of them is got red and white stripes, and the other sock has American stars on it. I mean, he really looks flamboyant. Let's put it that way. Chris Kraft just died. I didn't know this. Somebody told me Rutger Hauer just died. Rutger Hauer is one of my favorite actors of all time. I don't know what happened to him. I suspect probably alcohol or something. But Rutger Hauer was just a fantastic actor. I just loved him. He was great in Blade Runner, and he was really excellent in Lady Hawk. And there was something about, he's just, he's a real guy. He's like a kind of guy who's, if he's playing the villain, you're afraid of Rutger Hauer. And 75, that's too young. I saw a movie he made a couple years ago, and he looked like he was 1,000 years old, but I just saw the trailer for Top Gun 2, and Ed Harris, who played Gene Kranz in Apollo 13, and who played John Glenn in The Right Stuff. I saw the trailer for Top Gun 2, and I thought, what? Who is that? The guy looks like a mummy. He looks like the mummy from the horror movies. And it's time is passing, guys, and I just don't know what to do about it. It's just going to get worse, We're just going to see more people who we grew up with, a little older than us, start to kick the bucket, and then yeah, Ed Harris. Did I say somebody other than Ed Harris? But he's still with us. Foghorn just listed the final, just gave the final soliloquy of Roy Batty in Blade Runner, the replicant. And he has this speech, and I don't know if anybody knew this, but there's one line, and it's a beautifully written thing. He talks about seeing, well, I'll read it here. This is what Foghorn put up there. This is the end of his life. He's dying of old age. They have a 7-year or 4-year lifespan, something like that. And he says, I've seen things you people wouldn't believe. I've seen attack ships on fire off the shoulder of Orion. I've watched C-beams glittering outside of the Tannhauser Gate. All of these moments will be lost in time like tears in the rain. Time to die. Tears in the Rain was Rutger Hauer's line. He ad-libbed it. I think he might have tried to clear it with Ridley before they shot it, but I do know that he came up with that. It's the line of the movie. It's the line that everybody remembers from the movie, and he came up with that. So I'm going to miss him a lot too. Anyway, this is the personal questions edition of the Stratosphere Lounge. So why don't we take some personal questions? I am just to wrap up the whole spaceflight thing. On Saturday, I was very sad. It was, Saturday was just sad. It was a sad day for me, not because of the anniversary. It was sad because by Saturday, that's when it was over. I'd done a bunch of interviews and pickups, and I was going to watch the cuts of all of the things and trying to correct things, and still had a couple of picture errors. They put a picture of Martina Navratilova, Valentina Tereskova. They put a picture of her in for Gagarin by accident. I said, get the picture of him with the big CCCP on the helmet, and so they found a picture of somebody in a big helmet with CCCP on it, and all you can see is as much of the face, and it was the first woman in space. But anyway, other than that, a couple little tiny mistakes, but yeah, it was great. So Saturday I felt really kind of sad. It's just kind of this postpartum thing. It's like, all right, it's done. And then on Sunday I felt a lot better, and then Monday was actually kind of good. It's like, all right, what's next? Let's get going. So yes, Saturday. Thank you, Merlin. Clever man. Clever man. And Merlin sent me a text earlier today to remind me that if I ever do get to do the Battle of Leyte Gulf, it's Surigao Strait, not Suriago. Apple is making a series where the USSR gets to the moon first. Are they now? Okay. Anyway, so much for that. All right, so let's see what we got. We'll go to Whittle.com too. We'll take a couple from Facebook, and then we'll go back and forth between these two things here. Yep. Okay. What do we got? Personal questions. We did them last week. It just seems like we're just recycling the same old stuff again and again and again. That's my fault, really, obviously. But one of the members said they'd like to see more personal questions, and I still am utterly amazed at this, but apparently it's true. So let's see. Where is that post gone? There's the post. Where's the comment section? Maybe I need to refresh the page. There is some talk about doing more of these things, by the way, more of these history-type podcasts. That's all I can say right now, but we have been talking about it, and the topic they have in mind is pretty cool, if we can pull it off. Okay, here we go. I'm just going to chew through these about as fast as I can. I'm just going to go down the list. Cheryl Toomey says, ooh, I'm at SuperCon today, so I will miss tonight. My question, though, do you ever get discouraged by your fan base? Last week was a bit tough. Just wanted you to know we are here. Thank you very much. No, I don't get discouraged by the fan base. I get discouraged by myself when the fan base points out things to me that the fan base should point them out to me. It's just repeating the same stories about Taffy 3 and all this stuff again and again and again, and it's just, it's just laziness. Not laziness even. It's just I should just be going into the questions. I try to do what comes up for the week, whatever is on my mind when I sit down to do this show. But yeah, it had gotten a little repetitive, so I wasn't disappointed in the fan base. I was disappointed in me. Now there is, I should say, and I know I've talked to Scott about this, and he feels the same way, and I think most everybody must feel the way. The one thing that really does just rip the heart out of me and make me want to put it away is is when I get an email from somebody saying, Bill, I've been following you since eject, and but you said something about, insert person here. You said something about, a Mattis. That's just intolerable, and so I've canceled my subscription, and you're dead to me. I don't, those really do. They hurt more than the lies about being a Nazi and all the rest of it. When somebody says something like that, it's like I just want to just go home. I really do. It's like, so I've been talking for 10, 11 years now, and now I say something that you disagree with, and now I'm dead to you. Okay, that's that's hard. That's hard to take. And seeing, we don't draw a lot of lunatics, and certainly not in the Stratosphere Lounge. We don't tolerate it here. Not just me. Nobody else does either. But every now and then in the comments, you'll see something really ugly, and it's like, I don't need that here. I denounce it when I can and when I see it. I love differences of opinions, and I'm certainly ready to be convinced about a lot of things. But sometimes people say things that are just plain awful, and I want nothing to do with that. Hey, top fan Cheryl Tomey, that was top fan Steve Young says, have you heard from your nieces and nephews about your Apollo 11 podcast? Have they gone SJW? Yes, they have gone SJW. There's a chance they'll recover in another 15, 20 years as they get in their 30s and 40s. I have not heard from them about it. I did hear from my sister, and I sent the links personally to a very small group of people who are like really close friends. I'll tell you what I did hear, because we've heard as we record this now, which is coming up on 7 p.m. Pacific time. People in the comments section said that while I'm doing the show right now, Bert Rutan is giving one of his speeches at the giant air show at Oshkosh at AirVenture, and he's quoting me. And so a couple days ago, after I did part 4, I think the night that part 4 released, I got a call from Bert, and he said, "Hey, I've stayed with him many times at his house many times." And he said, "Hey, I was just down in the home theater down below. I was just watching part 4 for the 3rd time in a row. I've had tears in my eyes for 3 hours, or for all 3 times now. And I wanted to know if it'd be okay if I use some of the quotes from this from your show at Oshkosh." And needless to say, I said, "Yeah, come up with the cash, Jack. Otherwise, why are you bugging me? We know what the rate is. Pay up or shut up." And then I hung up the phone. Apparently, he's pirating them anyway. Yeah, so that was a high point for me. I didn't hear from Mike Melville. I'd like to, and I'm concerned that some people didn't get it, because when you send emails and you're not in their person's accepted group, especially when there's an attachment and links, it ends up in the spam filter. But I did hear from virtually everybody, and I certainly have heard from the people I most care about, and I've never heard comments like this before, not from me or from anyone else. I mean, they're amazing. They're absolutely amazing. I should say at this point that I want to say almost at least 2 years ago, maybe 3, because how about that? I met my wife at John F. Kennedy Airport a week. Sorry, it'll be 3 years in 3 days from now. And early, for at least 2.5 years, Natasha has been telling me I should be doing things like the Apollo podcast. I should be doing history documentaries. And the reason she told me that is because one of the first things that we watched when she came here to live permanently was a really excellent series of documentaries on the Romanovs. It was 2 Romanovs every episode, and I think it was 7, 8 episodes, something like that. It was really well done, and incredibly great graphics. And and she was so amazed because they've always been when she grew up was the end of the Soviet Union, final years of the Soviet Union, and she was told all the time how great her country was, but everybody knew that they were kind of lying. And then the Boris Yeltsin years, and the whole thing just collapsed, and it was just really embarrassing, and a lot of genuine insults basically issued to Russia, and having them sit outside the waiting room, that kind of thing. So when she saw this thing on the Romanovs, and she saw how strong Russia was becoming prior to the Bolsheviks taking over, it really affected her and made her really proud. And at least 2 years ago, she said, "Bill, you should do documentaries like the Romanovs thing." And I said, "Honey, I can't do that. There's just so much writing and production, and the graphics and the Romanovs thing were brilliant graphics, best I've ever seen in a documentary. I just don't have the resources to do it." But since Steve Darrow for the win there. But she's been mentioning it on and off since then. And when I found out I was going to do it, she was over the moon, if you'll pardon the expression. And watching it, she's absolutely right. So I just listen to her now. I just don't even bother thinking about anything. And if she says to do something, I just do it. She's always been pretty much correct. So I really enjoyed doing that, and the documentaries. I know we're going to do more of them. So I haven't heard, Steve, from my nephews and nieces. I don't expect to, and I don't really care. I really don't at this point. I just don't care. It's not something I think about. Steve Darrow, whose name I see a lot, and I notice is not top fan material. I don't even know what a top fan is or how you become a top fan, but Steve, it's time to stop slacking and get to work. He has questions for the Strata Loungers. We get to ask you questions every week. Do you have any questions for us? Interacting with the live stream could be fun. Clever idea. Very clever idea. Okay, here's a quick question for you. And it's only one question. It's the only one I could think of, and I think it's a really good question. There's going to be a little delay while everybody types in their answer, but here's the question: what is it you think, Stratosphere Lounge fans, Strata Loungers? What is it you think that you have in common? I think that's a pretty good question. What do you think you guys have in common? If you had to use one word, would be awesome, a sentence or two, but no essay answers. It's just got to be the first thing. So let's see what we get. Steve Darrow says principled thinking. I like the sound of that. Our most MVP Lisa says high trust and freedom. Eric Blake says you. Liberty, sense, moral values, an oddly disturbing fetish for BWDC. Yeah, me too. Open-mindedness, love of freedom, ethics, high IQ. We're all decent, moral human beings. Truth. I don't know. I'm mostly a lurker. Cody MacArthur for the win. Values, patriotism, value, love of liberty, low tolerance for BS ideas, freedom, fast cars, big guns, hot women and men. Love of freedom. Well, I have this mole. Everyone has that, right? Yeah. Okay. Great. Search for the truth, and I got to tell you, those are some high quality answers. Those are some high quality answers right there. Honesty, intelligence, integrity, patriotism, all of that. That's some very high praise. So thank you, Steve, for the question. It's a cool question. And thanks, guys, for the answers. Moving down. That looks like somebody I know. There's a picture there. Not going to be tuning in tonight on account of Bert the Man Rutan speaking at 8, but I have a personal question. I'll look for it in the playback. When Mike says, hey, where'd you get that shirt? Do you A, tell him about your 20-year obsession, or B, give him the shirt off your back? Um, he sent a picture of Mike. And Mike says, hey, where'd you get that shirt? Oh, I see. Mike Melville gets whatever he damn well wants from me. We had an initial problem with the engine on the Long Easy when I first got it. And the engine and the little problem is it stopped running. And the reason it stopped running was it had blown a cylinder on the way out here, and they'd replace the cylinder. The owner, builder owner, and an A&P mechanic, I don't remember where, middle of the country someplace, replaced the cylinder, and because there were two people working on it, somebody didn't tighten the screws that hold on the the input manifold, I think. So the thing was just running incredibly rough, and it was running incredibly rough because it was only running on 3 cylinders, and those cylinders weren't timed easily because air was getting in places it shouldn't have gotten in, and so on and so forth. And I didn't know what to do about this. We thought maybe it was bad plugs, bad mags. We checked all this stuff. And so Mike frickin' Melville gets in his Long Easy, comes down to my hangar. We spend an hour and a half checking mags, checking all of this other stuff. And then we did all that with the top cowl off and the bottom cowl still on. And then Mike says, this is just weird. Let's take the bottom cowl off and see if we can find anything down there. So we're unscrewing the bottom cowl, which is what covers the engine on the back of the plane. And he points down, and resting on the cowl as if it had been aligned like for a photo shoot or something, as I recall, was a gasket and two nuts. And he said, did you put those there? I said, no. He says, I know what your problem is. You're going to be flying in 10 minutes. So we just put that thing back on, bolted it on, and it ran great. But, Mike Melville flew down from Tehachapi to do that. Needless to say, wouldn't take any money for it. I felt duty-bound to offer it, but once he said no, I'm not going to argue with him. That can be insulting. But I did get to take him out to lunch and hear some amazing true tales of adventure. And his true tales of adventure trumped mine, needless to say. The one I remember the most about Mike Melville, from Mike Melville, was Scaled Composites developed. I think this is the only actual warplane prototype they developed. But they had a design for a ground attack aircraft called the Ares, and it was a really cool looking design, very lightweight, but it had a big gun in it. It didn't have the same gun that the A-10 has. I don't think anything has that gun, but it had a regular Vulcan Gatling gun, the kind of thing we put on regular fighters. And since this plane was made out of fiberglass, and that was part of the appeal of it, it had very low radar signature. Cool looking thing. But it had the gun was mounted off axis, and as I recall, the muzzle of the gun was just slightly behind the pilot. On the A-10, obviously, it's right at the very front of the jet. And I remember Mike Melville telling me he was doing the flight test for this, doing the fly-off for the government evaluation. And he said, I would roll in on a target, and I'd have the target lined up, and I'd pull the trigger on the gun. He said, and I felt like the airplane had hit a brick wall. Like I just, boom, like that. Because the recoil from the gun on such a low mass airplane, he said it was like it's like you just flew into the ground. It was just boom, and that wasn't much fun. So anyway, yeah, Mike Melville is great, and I'll tell you who else doesn't get enough credit, and who did write to me about this, and that's Bert's brother Dick, who is the man who flew Voyager around the world. He sent me an advance copy of his book about Voyager. That alone would make an excellent podcast. Make a great hour, the Voyager flight. I saw Dick give a speech. He invited me out to a Boy Scout thing at Oshkosh. It would be summer of 2015, I want to say. And he flew there in the Starship, which was great. I got to sit in the front seat, got to be in the air show. We talked about that before. Dick Rutan asked me to go with him when he talked to these Boy Scouts, and so I got to spend 3-4 hours with Dick Rutan, and he was great, and he had some amazing stories, just absolutely amazing stories. So what the heck is this? Just somebody linked a quote to a book in the Master Brigade. Choose a renegade scientist, spies who sabotage the knowledge. Oh, interesting. Anyway, yeah, Mike is a great guy, and Dick is a great guy, and that movie would be great. I can just tell you little bits of stuff, and this is not, violating anything, because these things I heard Dick say during his talk about Voyager. It was the 25th anniversary or something. 1986 is when it flew. And the two things I remember Dick saying was that he had, the plane was extremely unstable, very difficult to fly. The two booms filled with fuel, the wings were filled with fuel, very, very long, high aspect ratio wings because they were more efficient, and efficiency was everything. So the Voyager, as usual for Burt Rutan, the Voyager was built to climb out on two engines, and then once they got to cruising altitude, they turned the front engine off because they're not looking for speed; they're just looking for mileage. But when the plane was, especially when the plane was full, there was so much weight of the aircraft was outboard in the wings and in the empennages, that until they burned off a significant amount of fuel, like 3 or 4 days, about it, that if the Voyager hit any kind of turbulence at all, the wings would go up, and then the center would go up, and the wings would go down, and it would start to get into this wing flapping oscillation, and it was not what's the word I'm looking for? Something stable. The feedback on it was positive. It wasn't a negative feedback. In other words, it got worse and worse instead of getting better and better. I find out Dick is on stage now talking about Voyager. So because this thing was so unstable, he did the flight with Jenna Yeager, who was his girlfriend when they were raising the money, but they'd broken up by the time it became time to fly. And so he spent, 9 days, I guess, in a phone booth with his ex-girlfriend. But it was, it was supposed to be like two people, a two-person flight. She'd fly, he'd fly, she'd fly, he'd fly. And he said it was just crystal clear real early that she just didn't have the stick skill. She didn't have the feel for it. Some people can become pilots, and they just do it through instruments and like a mental thing, and other people just feel the airplane. And I remember my flight instructor in gliders told me that after the second or third lesson. It's like, no, you feel it. I can hold a plane. I can hold a plane a knot. 1 knot is a nautical mile an hour. It's 1 mile per hour basically above a stall. I could hold it above a stall all day. I could just feel it getting ready to go. Some people couldn't do that. And anyway, so she was one of those people who he couldn't. He's in the air. They're going around the world. He's going to be out for 9 days. And he realizes after they go through their first turbulence, a couple hours into the flight, that he's going to have to fly this whole thing. He's going to have to fly the whole thing. And that's a challenge. So the couple stories that I remember Dick telling, one of them was he was going down the runway on this thing. And Bert and Dick had an agreement, like a serious, genuine, blood brothers, slit your palm, kind of serious, honest to God agreement that if the aircraft was not at a certain speed, at a certain point down the runway, might have been the halfway point, if it wasn't there, if it didn't have this airspeed at that time, then you're going to abort the takeoff because it will not get off the ground. And Dick is doing the takeoff, and he's rolling this thing down there, and he's slowly accelerating. And sure enough, he got to that intersection, and he was 3 or 4 knots too slow. And he kept going. That's Dick. Got the thing off the ground. But the two things I remember most clearly was one of them was he's coming back. So they flew west. Yeah. So they immediately start out across the Pacific. And he said, so we're coming across Africa from East Africa to West Africa. And he's been flying for 5-6 days now. And he said he was so tired that the instrument panel was bulging towards him. He could see it just like bulging, like it was going to hit him in the face. So he had a rudimentary autopilot, and they had a turn point. It's like turn point 22 or something coming up on their course, and the turn point was like 45 minutes ahead or something. And so Dick is still at the controls, and he says to Jenna, he says, "Listen, I'm going to sleep for 20 minutes, okay? You wake me up at this point. You have to wake me up at this point." Okay. Second, she says, "Okay, he's out. He's just gone." And some time passes, and he wakes up, and he looks at the time, and he's been sleeping for almost like an hour and a half, 2 hours. He says, "What happened?" She said, "You just looked so comfortable, and the air was smooth. I just didn't want to wake you. You needed to sleep so bad." He goes, "Jesus Christ." And he checks his position, and he's 4 minutes from flying into a mountain or something that he knew he had to climb to avoid. And that's why he said, "You've got to wake me up in 20 minutes. It just came, he said we were 4 or 5 minutes away from just making a greasy spot on the side of a hill. So that is quite a story, and he's a great guy. And I've talked a little bit about some of the things he did in Vietnam and said, but we're not going to repeat that right now. So moving along. Okay, our friend Julius is asking a political question, which I'm going to avoid on this one. So if you want to bring it back again, Julius, that'd be great. And I think you got an email from us saying we will be there at your wedding if it's the Julius I'm thinking it is. So Martin Archer, top fan, says, personal and Apollo related, discounting Armstrong if he had to spend 2 weeks in Earth orbit on a Gemini mission, sharing stories and body odors of all kinds included, which Apollo astronaut would you prefer to endure that with? Okay, great question. Great question. Well, absolutely Neil would have been my first choice. I have to give this a moment of serious thought. My knee-jerk reaction is to say John Young. Yeah. It would be either John Young or Dave Scott. Lovell would be interesting, but after Armstrong, I admired John Young the most, especially just his career and when he was flying the first shuttle mission with Bob Crippen. He just looked like he had that thing completely aced. I remember when they finished that first flight to Columbia, Young and Crippen got out of the aircraft, and they had these trucks around that were supposed to like blow away this potentially dangerous vapor. So it was at least 15, 20 minutes, maybe longer, before they could get out of the vehicle after they'd landed it. But I remember watching Young and Crippen come down out of the orbiter and walking around the base of it and looking up at it, and they were just both going like, yes, they're just so happy with it. Dave Scott is a guy who I think didn't get nearly enough airplay, and some really nasty, I thought some very unfair things happened to him. Ringhun says Mattingly would be high on the list, but I think it'd probably be John Young, or Dave Scott. Now, I put almost everything I knew into that Apollo series, and there's only 1 or 2 places where I specifically and purposely did not include something I knew, and one of those had to do with Apollo 15 and Dave Scott. because after that mission was over, there was an enormous scandal about how Scott and Irwin had flown like a bunch of stamps and other memorabilia to the lunar surface to sell as, this has been to the moon. You can buy these things, they're available. So it came down on Apollo 15, and it came down on Dave Scott because he was the commander of it. Now, I don't know the exact details of this, but my understanding is that this kind of thing goes back to the Mercury program, when when the astronauts would take little things. There's a scene in The Right Stuff about Gus Grissom taking little plastic capsules up. So he got in a lot of trouble for it, but this was considered to be almost like a retirement plan for the astronauts, because these guys were not making a lot of money. They really weren't making a lot of money, and there was no real retirement plan other than the military pension, and so on and so forth. And it was just something that everybody did on every mission. But somehow the press got a hold of it on Apollo 15, and Scott and the crew of Apollo 15 and the mission all got tarnished. And I didn't put it in the show because I thought it was unfair. I just thought it was really unfair that it landed on them, and Dave Scott thought it was unfair too. And many years after the fact, way after it was way too late, he was exonerated, and they basically said, look, he didn't do anything that wasn't being done and known was being done by everybody else. So that's a great question. Let's see. Daryl Green, what do you wish you had more time for? I wish I had more time for making these Star Citizen videos. I was working on them like crazy. I knew I was burning a lot of bridges with my fan base. That wasn't my intention. I was compelled to do it, and I don't know what else to say. I was just compelled, and I remain to this day utterly convinced that this is the answer in the future. I remain absolutely convinced that that millennials are checking out of society because it's all social justice warriors and they have no chance to fight it, and so they simply bow their heads and say, you're right, I apologize, I'm sorry I'm male, I'm sorry I'm straight, I'm sorry I'm Christian, I'm sorry I'm American, all this stuff. And they go down and they get to live in a world which is more real than the one we live in, where you can have consequences and drive fast and, blow things up, what every red-blooded young man wants to do. And I rode that as far as I could until the point when I realized I can't. I just have to give it up. I can't do it anymore. And Scott had just come on, and we were doing Bill Whittle Now, and a couple weeks after that, I just remember saying, okay, that's it, you just got to stop it. And I'd like to pick it up again. And I have a chance to do it. There's a chance to do it on the cheap, and there's also a chance perhaps to do it on a much larger scale. So I am going to start looking at that after Oshkosh. Some of the people I need to talk to about are gone to Oshkosh. But I will say, having given it up, I know a person who essentially is, was born in front of Unreal Engine 4, which is what I want to do the videos in. And I asked him if he would be available to help me. So there's one possibility of really doing it on the cheap. And doing it on the cheap means I would send him characters. He would do the conversion of the characters, and he would get them rigged. Once they're correctly rigged, I've got the stuff to do the facial motion capture, body motion capture, and stuff. And it suddenly dawned on, it's not like suddenly dawned on me, but having had to give it up because I had no choice, I realized that if I did it this way, it might take a long time. But what I would basically do is say, give me this scene in Unreal, and I will direct the camera, and I'll put the motion capture there. Let's just here's the props I need or whatever, and just keep handing him assets, and he would hand me back scenes, and the characters would be in the scene, and then I would basically be given the little puppet show, and I'd make it all work. And I think there's a good chance of that happening. And so I just want to see output again. I know during that year I was working on those things, I was just so excited seeing the tests and costume tests and render tests, and it was just great. And I miss it very much. So that's definitely something I wish I had more time for. And I think I have the time to do that. And it does look like there's going to be more of these Apollo 11 type shows. So I'm going to be a busy boy, but that's good. It's good to be a busy boy. So that's, I think, one thing I wish I had more time for in terms of the work. Let's see. Matt Nielsen, sorry. If you could have one aircraft as a personal plane, any one, what would it be? P-51, F-100, F-15, B-36? Excellent question. I would have said an F-16, but that's a single-seat fighter. They do, of course, make a dual-seat version. It's the D, I guess, right, Foghorn? But it doesn't look good as a two-seater. So let me just do a quick little image search here. To answer your question with a picture, because frankly, I don't remember the name of this thing. Isn't that weird? Yeah, that looks like it. Okay. Yeah. I would like one of these. And I don't think it's too much to ask, actually, considering how much I do for this country. I think this is a modest request. Let me get one more picture. Yeah. Can anybody guess? Anybody want to take a risk? Here it comes. Yes, Foghorn for the win. I knew he would get it right. I knew it would be him. I would like one of these. This is the TX. It's the next generation trainer for the U.S. Air Force. It's a two-seater, and it is replacing the T-38 for advanced flight training. That is a wicked-looking airplane. Got a couple more for you here. That's kind of smaller than I thought. Oops. Is that you? Nope. Is that you? Yes. It's just a cool looking jet. I love the lines on it. I love it. The lines are better than they are on the on my previous favorite, the Viper jet. And there was a jet built by a Polish guy called the Iskra 2, and it flew once. And the original design of that was the coolest looking thing I've ever seen. It was a jet trainer. It was built by this guy in Poland. I'll give you one more. And I thought, man, that's a good looking airplane. But now it's just in an outdoor museum, just rotting away, returning to the soil. Oh, baby. Yeah. It's got that same kind of... This is what I loved about the Iskra. It was more pronounced on the Iskra, but if you look at this from this angle, you can see that the nose from the side is pointy, but from the top, it's a little more rounded, so it's got this kind of duckbill look. That is a fabulous-looking airplane, and I want one very much. So those of you out there who have access to Kickstarter or anything in that general vicinity, you know what to do. Oh, baby. Yeah. I would want one of these. And the thing I like about that is, number one, it's a two-seater, obviously. Number two, it's brand new, and it's got the reliability of is it a single jet or twin jet? It's got to be a single engine, right? Foghorn, I can't quite make it out from here. Foghorn says it flies like a Viper. So it's a plane that's designed to fly two people, and as a trainer, I'm going to assume that it's got friendly handling qualities, although fly-by-wire means most everything does have relatively friendly handling qualities. But yes, I would like one of those. Um, and it's using the Hornet motor. Even better. So it's basically the Hornet has twin engines, and this guy's using one of those. Now for the $1 million question. Um, and that is, how much money do you Stratolongers need to raise for me? And the answer is $9 billion, but I don't need all of them. One would do just fine. Do they give me any kind of a? It's got to be at least 20 million, I would think. 46 simulators. 19. Okay, so somebody want to take $9.2 billion and divide it by 475 for me on account of me being already running out of my allocations for dead air on this particular show. Good Lord, that's a good-looking jet. That's just a good-looking jet. And so that's the answer to that question. And I'm going to guess that it is 54 million per plane? Come on. It can't be 54 million. Really? Oh, I need to resize my frame apparently, sorry. Let's see if that's, okay. Well, I'm just going to have to work harder, because I'll tell you one thing. Honey, you should probably just turn down the sound just for a moment. I would just turn the sound down just for 1 moment. Okay, good. Just give me 15 seconds. Look, if I had $100 million, I would spend 54 million of it on it, and if I had $60 million, I would spend $54 million on it, because I could live real well on, $3 or $4 million. If I had $56 million, if I had 55 million, I would buy one of these for 54 million and find a way to make do on the remaining million. And if it turns out we had to give up the house, we just couldn't afford it, then sleep in the airplane. No problem. Hangars are relatively cheap compared to Sherman Oaks property, so that's basically, I think, what I would do. Okay, that was a great question. That was very cool. All right, so let's see. Let's move it on here. Martin Archer, top fan. Da, 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 da. What is a possibly embarrassing pop culture thing you like but have never discussed with us before? Oh my God, it'd have to be the music. A lot of people have mentioned that that's pretty eclectic selection, and I wish it was easier to convert the MP4s. But yeah, and I think I did a whole half an hour or an hour on this, and everybody was saying, Jesus, Bill, okay, we get it. I think I listed every single song on my phone. But there's a lot of pop culture stuff that I like. And it mostly just because it gave me, I do have, Dave Big Booty says Bill's going to admit that he likes Enya. I have at least 4 Enya songs on my phone. But mostly they're pop songs that just made me feel happy or reminded me of a good time. So I've got I really shouldn't go here, but I'm gonna anyway. I've got I Think I Love You from the Partridge Family. I've got Bop from Hanson. I'm trying to think of the ones that are gonna get the most outrage. I've got Pop by NSYNC. I've got a fair amount of Expose, only because I worked in a nightclub, and that was all there was. People just playing Expose all the time. I have got Ice Ice Baby, but I really do. I've got that song. Let me think. I have a very bizarre song called "Know Your Chicken" by Sibo Mata. If anybody in the comment section has heard Know Your Chicken. That's a song I need to get into rotation for the Roland because that is the strangest song I've ever heard. Let's see what else. I've got a lot of ABBA. We drove cross country, Steve Stipp and I, in his, I want to say it was a '74 Ford Maverick, and the seats on the Maverick were bench seats. No, not individual seats, just a bench seat in the front seat, and the seats in the Maverick were I'm not exaggerating now. You would get in the Maverick for a 2-day drive, and by the time you got to the Florida Turnpike 15 minutes later, you can't bear how uncomfortable it is. You're just already just kind of doing this and stuff. I don't have any Led Zeppelin. I never really liked Led Zeppelin. I do have Hotel California. I think one of my favorite songs of all time, I've got a lot of Cure. I've got, I think, Boys of Summer, the Don Henley song. I think it's just one of the greatest songs ever written. It's just beautifully written, beautifully produced. I've got lots and lots and lots of 80s music. I've got some things from the 80s that I saw, yeah, and they were made out of vinyl too, as Dave Big Booty points out. I've got some things that are just really, I heard once or twice on MTV. I have any jazz players? I do. I've got Take Five by Dave Brubeck. I've got what else? I've got I really love that song Linus and Lucy from the Charlie Brown specials. Da 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 da. It's beautiful. There, Just Like Heaven is an amazing song. It's an amazing song. And I've got a lot of weird little 80s tunes too. Sometimes some of these, most of you would probably not recognize. I do not have David Hasselhoff, Teddy Antis, so there are some standards. I do have Pat Benatar, but it's by accident. I do have a lot of classical music. I don't think I have. Yes, the only thing I have that's opera is I have the Flower Song. Who does that? And I've got a lot of classical. I've got Boccherini and lots of Bach. Let me just find it. Now I just got to know. Come on. I can't ever remember how to. It's a classical tune. It's beautiful. In fact, I'll play. I got Fly Like an Eagle. I can't find it. I'm not going to waste a lot of time. I do have. I'm going to play this, and it's going to yes, the Flower Song from Lakshmi. It's absolutely stunning. I am going to play into the microphone one of my all-time favorite songs, and I know the quality's not going to be great, but I just absolutely love this song. It's very short. It's like 2 minutes. I was tempted to tell you what it is, but I'm just going to play it for you. And undoubtedly, this will mean no monetization of this particular show, but I don't really care. I love this song. I love this song because it so totally encapsulates what I hate about Ivy League people who think that they can run this country better than the people who actually live here.
Fight fiercely, Harvard. Fight, fight, fight. Demonstrate to them our skill. Albeit they possess the might, nonetheless we have the will. How we will celebrate our victory. We shall invite the whole team up for tea. How jolly. Hurl that spheroid down the field and fight, fight, fight.
Here comes the greatest line ever.
Fight fiercely, Harvard. Fight, fight, fight. Impress them with our prowess. Do.
Do.
Oh, fellows, do let's fight for Harvard's glorious name. Won't it be peachy if we win the game? Oh goody, let's try not to injure them, but fight, fight, fight. Let's not be rough though. Fight, 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 and do fight fiercely. Fight, fight, fight.
Fight fiercely, Harvard. Fight. My God. That sound like the Stray Cats to me. I love that song. Great tune, Rock This Town. Fight fiercely, Harvard. Fight, fight, fight. Impress them with our prowess. Do. Brilliant. Yeah, so there's a lot of 80s songs. There's some of these, most of you probably never heard of because they're kind of obscure 80s songs. One of them is Make a Circuit with Me by the Polecats. That's one of my favorite songs ever. I just love that song. And let's see. I used to have an album of I don't have it anymore. I should probably just download it again. Doug and the Slugs. What was their hit? I heard it on. It was a Canadian band, Doug and the Slugs. I actually had. I used to, when I was like in my late teens, early 20s. I really got into Klaatu, because it was kind of like space music, and not space music. It was just kind of science fiction-y kind of music, and that was somebody mentioned Rammstein, and I think I'm pretty sure I have Du Hast, but I know for a fact I have Reise. I got that song because I read an article about Rammstein in I don't know what the magazine was, but I know that it was one of those long articles. 20-page magazine article, and it was clear that the woman who wrote the article was just crazy in love with the lead singer of Rammstein, but she was just basically saying it's just so masculine and brutal and just Reise is that's the sound that hell makes, but it's a killer song. I mean, it is really just kind of you can really feel that whole kind of German kind of things. I don't have the Panzer song, although I like that song too. I remember that from being a little kid. I saw that was that Battle of the Bulge, that movie? Is that what it was called? I was watching it with my dad when I was young, and there's a scene in this movie where Robert Shaw plays a Panzer commander, and he is looking at his recruits, and they're all just a bunch of kids. All of his soldiers have been killed. He's, this is the end of 44 on the Western Front, and he's going to launch this big Panzer attack. And he's looking at these, he just thinks, these guys are just children. They're not going to be able to do it. And then this one kid starts singing this, the Panzer song. It's a tanker song that the Germans had in German. And then everybody picks it up, and finally Robert Shaw is singing at the top of his lungs. It's a really moving moment. And I remember my dad saying, you got to respect these guys, because he was getting ready to go fight them. But you got to really respect them. So I have a lot of stuff, a lot of 80s stuff. And every time I hear something unusual, I like it. I'll just get it. I've got, Counting Flowers on the Wall is just a weird song. I just like it. I've Been Everywhere, Man, which I put in the rotation, I think. It's just a cool song. I'm really starting to get into these kind of Americana kind of, Beach Boys, Hot Rod Lincoln, Shut Down, that whole period, King of the Road, all that jazz. So anyway, we'll do a couple more. And let's see. This is interesting. Bill Murphy says, not really a question, more of a statement. Bill, I want you to know that I discovered you when I had a life-changing experience 7 years ago, and it sounds weird, but I see you as a father figure. You've helped guide my political thinking, questioning, and how I approach many critical aspects of my life. I haven't always agreed with everything you've ever said, you miserable. What kind of a son are you? Go stand in the corner. But I've always respected you, and I know that you want the best for those of us who follow you. I just wanted to tell you thank you for every word you've spoken or written to us. What a kind and beautiful thing to say, Bill. Thank you very much. It's very, very kind of you. There's nothing. I think probably the best way I've ever been able to describe what I do is to say I am not a painter, I'm a photographer. I don't invent this stuff. I don't. Most of the work, almost all the work I do is synthesizing other really brilliant ideas. Occasionally, now and then, I'll have a pretty sharp idea on my own, but mostly what I do is try to explain things and synthesize things. And so all I do is just take word pictures of America, the way it was, the way it is, the way it could be, might be, and I don't certainly believe in anything or defend anything or say anything that's not just available to everybody. It's just common sense. That's all. And common sense is not so common anymore, I guess. But the thing I like most about it is this is the political theory of having no political theory. It's really a great place to be. It really is very simple. I think I was talking with Scott when Scott first joined us and helped save this company, not just helped, really, just did. We're trying to figure out what it was we were selling, and I remember saying common sense, and then I said also, that's not just common sense. I know I've told this story briefly before, but we were doing a show on Ruth Bader Ginsburg, and this was before we did the backstage show, and we turned on the backstage show to discuss the segments, and this was before we started recording that. And we were talking about her being AWOL, just missing, disappeared. And all of us, Steve and Scott and I, pretty much simultaneously said, "Look, I hope she's okay. You know, I don't want her. I don't want anything bad to happen to her. I don't want her to die. I don't want her to be sick. I just wouldn't mind seeing her off the Supreme Court." And all three of us came out with that almost at exactly the same time. And I think about what some of the people on the left say in terms of, "Oh, we gotta kill these people," and not just on the left. And that's when I realized it's common sense and decency. That's it. That's the formula. Real simple. And everything that I try to do is just common sense. And if the common sense answer leads you someplace morally questionable, then you bring in the decency. It's not normally the case because common sense is usually based on decency and just obvious stuff that makes life easy for everybody. But I will tell you, Bill, it's things like that just make it, make this whole thing worthwhile for me. It never ceases to amaze me, and it's not false modesty on my part. It really, honestly, isn't. Just the idea that people wanted to do a personal show is just kind of astonishing to me. But I certainly did realize doing the Apollo thing that you can tell. You can keep people interested if you can tell a good story, and I think I probably can do that. And I think I've been doing that. I remember writing I came to visit the States when I was living in Bermuda, and I think I wrote about visiting Dorney Park in Pennsylvania, and I was in third grade, and they printed it in the newspaper and stuff. So I don't know. I do have. I think my primary ability really is to be able to understand complex things. I got just enough horsepower to be able to understand complex things. And since I have a basic understanding of them, I can then figure out how I explain it to myself, and then that becomes basically something that I can do. And as it turns out, I've led a very, very interesting life, moved around and done a bunch of things. And so when you tie it into personal events, you humanize the data in a way that makes it emotional, which means it sticks. Joseph Miller, I think I just saw he checked out on the live version. He said, I hope they get to my question. I think it was Joseph Miller. Anyway, the question is not really personal, but how is work coming along for Big Bat Problems in Aurora? Both of those are on hold. One of the reasons why I want to do these video game movie things is because this technology is moving so fast that very soon, I mean within 2 or 3 years, I'll be able to do those movies here. I would much rather do them live on location. Much rather. It's fun. Making movies is fun. Going out on location is fun. It's a lot of work and it's a lot of stress, but it really, really is fun. And I wrote Big Bad Problem specifically to be a low budget film. It takes place inside a series of vehicles like vans and RVs and stuff. And and I'm very, 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 very happy with that story. I just think that story's just grand. Likewise for Aurora, although the first Aurora really is still, looking back on it now, which was my entire obsession for 5, 6 years, that was a story about going to a mission to Jupiter with no magic. It's just like we had to go tomorrow kind of thing. And I think the thing that it's still missing is the antagonist. You've got to have your heroes have to be up against something, and maybe I never really got it fully developed. But for me, in Aurora, the villain was Jupiter. Jupiter was the antagonist, and as you got closer and closer and closer to it, they started to see. Well, it wasn't like they were hallucinating, but it began to have this effect on them. They'd be watching like the infrared of Jupiter, and they'd be listening to the radio waves, translated into audio. And this just giant glowing red ball of gravity and radiation. And I don't know. I don't think I ever really clarified the thing as a fight between them and Jupiter clearly enough in my head, but that's what I would do. So they're sitting there waiting. I just, it's like everything else. It's just money. And that's the problem. So let's see what else we got. Craig Schleep says, what do you do for fun and relaxation, and what do you do to motivate you? I used to fly, and then I found something much, much better than that. I just love traveling with my wife. I love it. I love it. And especially when we can go on a train, which we've only done twice, but we really, 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 really love Amtrak. Natasha and I can drive with her to, Vegas is a relatively short drive, and that's that. We get in the car, and next thing you know, we're there. It's like, the thing about that woman is I have never, ever, ever, ever been bored by her. She's always got something to say that just fascinates me, and she's so smart, and is interested in a bunch of things that I generally don't get into. So I get a chance to learn a lot. But that's really it. Dave Big Booty says it'll take us to the Twine Ball. Well, we're going to pack up the car and go. No, we're going to fly there. We got to drive if we're going to go. Anyway, yeah. So it was flying, and I look back on it. I really do, and I mean this sincerely. When I would think about what my life was like before I met my wife, I don't know how I fit into it. I don't know how I could have been that small. This is a high point of my week would be, heading down to the hangar and pulling this airplane out of the hangar and firing it up and flying it around, and that felt cool. It really did, and I got to pretend I was a fighter pilot, and a Long Easy is a pretty good imitation of a fighter plane, especially the way I flew it. I flew it real aggressively. Safely but aggressively. I would just snap roll this thing, and I'd fly 60, 70-degree banks in the pattern just because I could. But when I look back on it, it's like, yeah, that's what you did. That was your whole life, basically. That was pretty much it. And I wouldn't trade I wouldn't trade a trip with my wife in a car for the whole 1,000 hours of flying I had. It was great, but it's nothing like this. I've become unrecognizable to myself, and I'm very, very lucky, very lucky. I think that'll do it for the night. Just kidding, Eric. Top fan Eric Blake says, "What are your three most favorite movies of all time, or the first three favorite movies you can think of top of your head, and why?" Well, that's a good question. I don't know whether or not I can. Aliens by far is my favorite movie. And then I have a bunch of candidates for second place, but Aliens by far. When I saw Aliens, I loved Alien. I loved the first one. I loved it, and that was we were coming out of the '70s science fiction desert. There was nothing. I mean, nothing in the '70s. There was Logan's Run, and Laser Blast. 77 was when Star Wars came out, and that was it. But Star Wars is science fantasy. Aliens, I was at the peak of my filmmaking mania, and there's a magazine, I think it's called Cinefex. It's all before digital effects. And Cinefex was about how you would do the special effects shot in this. And I started seeing stuff coming from Alien. Yeah, Silent Running, that's a good one too, Dave Big Booty. It's not a great movie. And I'd start seeing these suits coming out from this movie called Alien, the first one, horror movie. And I'd start seeing the Geiger stuff. And that's common now, that whole... Ridley Scott invented how the future looks. I mean, all the interiors of spaceships look like the inside of the Nostromo or the Sulaco. And all of the cities look like LA in 2019. I think that was the year, wasn't it? When Blade Runner takes place. He just invented it. So anyway, but when you started to see this biological ships, and I remember the first time I saw a still of the eggs laid out there in the alien spaceship at the beginning of Alien, I just thought, what a great, 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 great game. Julius wants to know if I played Alien Isolation. I don't think I played Alien Isolation. I played an Alien video game first-person shooter that came out 15, 20 years ago. Yeah, and Dave Big Booty brings up an interesting point too, that the computer graphics in Alien are terrible, because they're computer graphics from 1979. Another terrible, terrible, terrible offender in this regard is 2010. So in 2001: A Space Odyssey, which is certainly in the top three, no question, the computer displays in 2001: A Space Odyssey today hold up. They're just brilliant. They look like the future still. They are so beautifully organized and so clean and so consistent, And you just see that the little three-letter code, NAV, NAV, HIB, hibernation, and all of the charts and the stuff, and the computer graphics in 2001: A Space Odyssey, which came out in '68, look so good because they weren't done with computer graphics, because there was no computer graphics. It was all done by hand. They were hand animations done by some of the guys that had worked on Disney animation, cell animation, which is why it looks so sharp and so good. And then along comes the Apple and the PC revolution. So 10 years after 2001 or 12 or whatever, how many years, whenever 2010 came out. Inferior movie in every way, but you would see on the screens, on the curved cathode ray screens, this big, on board the Leonov, you would see computer graphics. Yeah, it looks like a Commodore 64, John Pershing says, except not so good. Straight line, alias, kind of It's like, look, computer graphics, please, please. Joyce brings up a point. You know what? I wouldn't mind making this a subject of a conversation maybe next week's show. That'd really be fun. If somebody could remind me next week, let's talk about special effects in movies and science fiction movies. Because Julia says practical effects are still used today and they look better than CGI. As a general rule, I agree. There's been a couple of exceptions, but nevertheless. I would really like to talk about special effects. So to answer your question, Aliens, number one. I don't think Alien is in the top 5. Close Encounters of the Third Kind, especially the director's edition, is certainly in the top 3 or 5. What do you think? The Greatest Showman is in my top five. I loved it. Loved it, loved it, loved it, loved it, loved it. Um, hmm. And a couple things just spring to mind. There are a couple of, I really don't, I'm sure if I had to make a list, I could pare it down. But a couple of movies just flew into my head. We're talking about 70s sci-fi, and some of it was actually very good. And the two things that I liked a lot were Fantastic Voyage, where they shrink you down and put you inside this guy's body, and they have to burn out this brain tumor, or it's not a brain tumor, it's a blood clot. Forbidden Planet goes back even further. Forbidden Planet is one of the most brilliant movies ever made. Forbidden Planet needs to be remade by somebody who loves Forbidden Planet, but Forbidden Planet as a remake would be unbelievable. It would be unbelievable. Um, uh, but I liked Fantastic Voyage, and I liked Andromeda Strain. The original Andromeda Strain is a freaking tight, 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 tight movie. That movie scared me badly. And well, I also liked the movie called The Omega Man very much. It was the second take on a movie that's been made third time called I Am Legend. It was Vincent Price, and then it was Charlton Heston, and then it was Will Smith. But Omega Man is Heston at his best, and it was really kind of the first. I don't know if it preceded Night of the Living Dead, but it was really kind of the first zombie movie where you've got a guy who's armed to the teeth, and all he does is just go around just gunning down bad guys, and he ends up hunting them in the daytime because they come out at night. Their eyes are real sensitive, and the thing in the movie in Omega Man that they never got to, but the whole point of this was that he was in fact the devil to these post-apocalyptic people. He was the person that came and murdered them in their sleep. But Heston, look, Chuck Heston is a. You go into Chuck Heston movies the way you would go into a circus or something, or Cirque du Soleil or something. You know that you're going to get something that is not pitched at normal levels of drama. Chuck Heston is a magnificent actor, but he's also a terrible actor. I don't know how to describe it other than that. Heston does his own thing, and no one else can do it. And when he's doing it, I buy it. But when you look at it dispassionately, it's just terrible. But so Heston plays this guy who developed a serum against this thing, and as a biological war weapon, and turned everybody into these kind of zombies. And Chuck was the guy who was developed the serum, and then the guy who's flying a helicopter or something gets the disease in flight, and the helicopter crashes, and Chuck crawls through the burning wreckage and injects himself with this serum, and then he basically has an apartment in New York, which is surrounded by bright lights and sandbags, and he just drives through the empty city and watches movies, and it's just a really great movie. And I seem to remember that the calendar on the wall, his car, something happens to his car, so he decides he's just going to get a new car because he just walks into a car dealership, finds the keys, and he looks up at the calendar, and I want to say that the end of the world was, I'm pretty sure it was March something 1975. Anyway, it was, I loved that movie. It was great fun. Okay. The twine ball is real, says Dave Olson. Yes, I know that is true. Let's see. I'm going to do maybe one more. I'm just going to do one more. Let me see what we got here. Okay, I'm gonna take two more. I'll take the last one I saw. This is from Sarge. Have you ever had your DNA done? Curious to know how your ancestry pans out. As it turns out, Sarge, when I met Natasha, we both got the 23andMe kits, and they sat on that table right there in the studio for 2.5 years. And then finally, we decided to get them done. And Natasha was up in Montana and also saw Yellowstone and Wyoming and just blew her mind. But while she was gone, we both got the results back, and we looked at our DNA results last night. So that's why I decided to take that question. Have I ever had my DNA done? Yes, I did, and I saw the results less than 24 hours ago for both of us. I was about to go get the reports, but I don't need to get in that kind of detail. We looked at Natasha's first, and I've never seen such a tight cluster. I mean, 100%. Her Eastern European background. She is like I think it was 99.2% Eastern European or 98.4. It was some incredibly high number like that. So she is Russian and Polish all the way through. Not a speck of Scandinavian blood in her, which surprised me and probably surprised her. Um, and it's all there. And they're able to isolate it down to like the particular oblast. It's like stuff. So while it was really cool and very, very interesting in its own way, there's not a whole lot to tell about it because once you say it's all comes from Central Russia and Eastern Poland, there you go. She has more Neanderthal in her than I do, but I've got some too. But no, it was incredible how narrow that slice was. When you get the results, you get a pie chart of how much of this and that, and it's color coded by area. Like Europe is blue, and the Asia is, I guess it's yellow, Africa's purple or something like that. And it was just all one color, and then a little tiny wedge with also blues, indicating a little bit of variation. Mine was a little more varied than I knew it would be. I have to tell you, I honestly, seriously expected to have significant African ancestry because I'm a quarter Portuguese, and the entire Spanish peninsula was conquered by the Muslims, and held for what, 2, 3, 400 years, maybe longer, something like that. So that's where these black shark-like eyes come from. And they damn near are black, by the way. When you make a character in Star Citizen, you get to pick your eye color, and I was trying to make something look more or less like me, and I went with brown, and it's like, no, you can see brown. They're dead eyes. They're like a doll's eyes, like a dead eyes, like you see on a shark, or Quint would say. And it turned out, no, it is all Northwestern European, every single bit of it. Well, with one exception. I think it's like 6 or 7% Italian, but it's 40 something English and Irish, a fair amount of German and Polish. But I was really shocked. Nothing from Asia, not a thing. Nothing from Africa, nothing from the Americas, obviously. Although I do have the high cheekbones. And that really did surprise me, honestly. I'm still, compared to Natasha, I mean, she's a Afghan hound and I'm a mutt. It really is Lady and the Tramp. But I wasn't as much of a mutt as I expected to be. And all of that was not a lot of Scotland, almost all Ireland and northwestern England. That was the biggest percentage, 42%, 43%. Portuguese showed up. Some Italians showed up. That surprised me a little bit. But it was all blue. It was all blue in with no exceptions. I was really quite surprised about that. And I have to tell you, I'm a little disappointed because I really, really seriously would have liked to have had a significant percentage of African blood. It would have made me very happy politically and just personally. What I was hoping for was that I would have more African ancestry than Kamala Harris, whose ancestors owned slaves in Jamaica and who's pushing for reparations. And I wanted to be able to say, here's some science, Camilla, you owe me a check. That would have been cool. But anyway, GED match. Trevor from Florida says you can run it through GED match and it's much more specific. I'd like to see more specific. I thought it was cool. The only other person that was in there that I knew was my sister. She'd had the test done. I didn't know she'd have it done, but most people agree to release their personal information so they can find connections. So my sister was there, obviously. And, just that alone is pretty impressive. It's like, here's your sister. It's like, how do you know it's my sister? No, it's your sister, all right. So she was there. And then there were a significant number of second cousins, first or second cousins that I'd never heard of before. A lot of second cousins. They listed in order of, distance from you genetically. Natasha, on the other hand, her most common family member was third cousin. Way, way, way narrower, like that. And Woody Fool says, and now your DNA is in the database. It is, but here's the thing about that. The DNA is in the database because I voluntarily put it there. They asked many times whether I wanted to release it, and I checked yes because I think it's valuable for the science, and I'm not worried too much about that at this point. But nevertheless, yeah, I put it out there. But I just think the whole thing's fascinating. By the way, they track your maternal groups and your paternal groups, and I think this was true for Natasha, and maybe for me. I actually don't remember which one of it was, but we are from a maternal line where we essentially almost everybody that left Africa is descended from one woman. There really is an Eve. I remember reading a couple books about this where the migrations out of Africa because humans came to be in Africa, and there was no way to get out of Africa except to go along the northeast corner. They couldn't get across the Mediterranean Sea. You basically had to go through the Middle East. And it was a long trek, and it was desert and a lot of stuff. And so what they've been able to reconstruct using DNA as well as archaeological evidence is that a group of Africans left Africa somewhere in the neighborhood of 200,000 years ago. And they survived. And they became Peking man, and the ones that went west became Neanderthal. And then much more recently, I want to say 65,000 years ago, but don't quote me on that, a second group finally made it out, and that became modern humans, which interbred to some degree with Neanderthals. But here's the thing that's cool about that. They're able to take a look at it genetically, and they think that all non-Africans are descended from a group of about 120 people, 120 individuals. They just packed up their stuff and decided to go. And it was so hard. And in fact, the second wave had it even harder because not only they have to deal with the hardships, but they also have to deal with the fact that Peking man and Neanderthal is already there. And they didn't like it too much. But it was like 120 people. 120 Africans just decided to say, all right, we're going for it. And that just blossomed up to the north and the northwest and the east and everything after that. But I don't remember what the actual number was. I do remember hearing at one point that the choke point at one point we were down to something like 5,000 humans in the world total, and it might have been less than that. That's kind of amazing when you think about it. On a somewhat related note to this, Natasha, as I said, was up in Montana, and she went to a rodeo and saw Yellowstone and all the rest of it. And one of the things she saw was a couple of buffalo. I said a buffalo, an American bison. If you're a cow, that's the Incredible Hulk. It's like Captain America. It's a super cow. These things are just so tough looking and strong and stuff. But it's just a bunch of buffaloes just roaming around out there. And when I was young, I remember when I first came to America in the early 70s, we were down to 600 buffalo. I want to say that's the number I remember. 600 left in the world. Finally, they somehow decided, I don't know why they didn't figure this out earlier, but somewhere around there, um, they they decided to start protecting these endangered species. This is back when environmentalism was actually environmentalism instead of communism disguised as environmentalism. So buffalo became protected, and they were down to 600 of them, 600 individuals, and now I'm sure they're back into the millions. Wolves almost went extinct. They're back hard. When I was young, when I first got to Florida, gators alligators were endangered. Now they're putting a bounty on them. They're just everywhere. There's just so many of them. And my favorite, of course, is the bald eagle. The bald eagle was very, very, very close to extinction. It was very close to extinction, and it's made a tremendous comeback. I saw them up in Coeur d'Alene. I saw them just. I've seen them probably twice. It, for me, seeing a bald eagle in the wild is just mind-boggling experience. It's just absolutely mind-boggling. It just take your breath away. It's such a magnificent looking bird. It is without question the coolest mascot for any country in the world. The bald eagle is just a badass looking. In fact, I like the bald eagle so much that when we were doing the Star Citizen stuff and making the squadrons, the first squadron I came up with was the Eagles, and I did all the graphics for that website at aurorarepublic.space. And so there's consistency and stuff, and then a bunch of other people helped with input and stuff. But I basically wanted them all to look the same and at the same time look different. And my favorite to this day is still Ace 1 Air Combat Elements 1 Eagles. And I'm going to just show it to you because I found all these great graphics, and this is just magnificent. I just love it. HC Lucas 200. Where are you? There you go. I'm going to make a copy of this. Bring it over here. Yes, good. And then we will do this. I'm just showing you this because this graphic, the eagle graphic, I just love it. To me, it's America in a nutshell. I just love it, love it, love it. Let's see how big it's going to come in. Holy cow! That surprised me. Hang on. No, I'll just leave it there. Isn't that cool? I mean, just look at that thing. It's just a badass mofo, and there's something about that eagle, and it's true for the bald eagle too. They look very fierce, but they also look very intelligent. It's got to be something about the eyes. But I just love that logo, and I love the font as well, and the colors. I just think it's just great. So anyway, that's that. And then I saw one more question that I wanted to do. We can get rid of you. Goodbye. And it's here. I just thought this was interesting. I don't have an answer ready, but this will be the last one we do. Hey, look at that. 2 hours, 15 minutes. Daryl Green says, can you tell us a couple of relatively minor things that nevertheless irritate you? That's a great question. I am utterly convinced that I'm capable of homicide, being stuck on freeways behind people who are driving in the passing lane at the same speed as cars that were in the right lane. It makes me insane. It makes me crazy. I don't mind people driving slow if they go slow as they want to in the right-hand lane. I've often said I think the country just ought to make an investment and hire 3 million Germans to come over here and teach us how to drive, because they don't put up with that nonsense. People driving slowly in the fast lane, as if it's like, hey, here's 2 lanes, pick one. No, it's not how it works. If you're being passed on the right, you should get a ticket. And I've always found that almost unbearable. It goes back to what we talked about at the beginning of the show when you're on the Florida Turnpike and you're doing 55 miles an hour or something, and you got two people and they're both doing 53 and nobody. And it's like, move out of the way, move. Slow traffic, keep right. Damn it, God Almighty. I just hate it. Let's see what else. I have found, and I found I'm getting more brittle about this as I get older. I'm a real stickler, like almost a fanatic for like following the rules. It's not really the same thing as obeying the law, but following the rules. For instance, I speed. I don't anymore, but it's just because I've been civilized. But I used to speed all the time, and if I got caught, then I was breaking the law. Pay the fine. That's that. But I am very annoyed by people who try to cut in front of you in a line of any kind of cheating. Really, cheating really drives me nuts. Watching people cheat doesn't even have to be affecting me. Really, really, really bothers me more than it should. It really gets under my skin bad, and that's probably related to my strong sense of justice, which is probably a result of having had a lot of, just hardship and stuff in my earlier years. And any kind of injustice really bothers me. And I can give you a good example of this. Because you said little things. Natasha and I both discovered, these like Postmates and Uber Eats and stuff where you get restaurant food delivered to the house. She's an artist and she's always working on photography, and I'm busy wasting my time at home. And so we just love it. We just get out the phone. I want one of these. Dink. It shows up. But when I was very, very beginning of it, I ordered something from Uber Eats, and a lot of times I set my phone on Do Not Disturb after a certain hour, and I kept thinking, this is really taking a long time, and I looked down, and I saw that that the person had been here and left. And she didn't ring the doorbell. She just sat in her car for 10 minutes and then left, which I went on to find out is the Uber Eats minimum. And they were able to check it on her app. They said, "Well, sir, she did wait outside for 11 minutes and sent you a text." It's like, I don't live in, this isn't Compton. It's like, why can't you come to the door like every other Uber driver and Uber Eats driver and Postmates driver ever? And they said, "Well, we're sorry. So you basically forfeited the meal, and we're not going to refund your money." And I just got so bloody angry about this. It's like, I was thinking, well, and I'm texting to these people, and I'm saying, well, where's the food? What happened to the food? It didn't get delivered, so what happened to it? "Well, we don't know that, sir. It doesn't go back to the restaurant." I said, "No, I guess not. That's convenient." And it got to bother me so much that I was just walking this thing up to higher levels of people. And I should say in my own defense that I almost never do that, but I will often, if I get good service, good bank service or somebody, I'll just say, "Can I talk to your supervisor?" and just say, "Hey, you need to give that person a raise and a promotion. They're really terrific." I do that all the time. But I was so upset about this, and I was typing, and I don't remember what the number was, but it was something like $3,000 or something we'd spent on it in the course of a year or something. And I said, "Are you telling me that you're going to lose $3,000 worth of business in the next few months because you're not going to refund $17? Because I will not ever use this service again." And and I have a following, and I'll make sure that nobody else who ever listens. I was so outraged by it. I just thought it was unjust. I thought it wasn't fair, and it made me like a bulldog, and it just went to bed furious. And the next day, and I'm furious, and it's like, and suddenly this is part of having a person like Natasha in my life, not like Natasha. I just found that the next day or 2 days later, she didn't say anything to me about it. I just found, you know what? I don't have to be so angry anymore. I don't have to be angry about everything anymore. This is silly. It's a silly thing to be angry over. Don't waste your time. You got bigger things to be angry about. And I just kind of shrugged it off, and that's been kind of the pattern, which is certainly going to make me live longer. I might have mentioned this once or twice, but before I got married, I was a bachelor till I was 57. That's a long time. That's a feral guy. But I remember during that entire time seeing these reports saying that married men lived 10 years longer or 12 years longer than single men. And I said to myself, that can't be possible. I just don't believe that's true. I don't believe it. Because, I see a lot of bad marriages. My parents got divorced, and I just said, no, it can't be true. And then when I got married, I realized, this has added 15 years to my life, 20, easily, just in terms of the joints where the plumbing goes into the walls in the body. It's like I would have been busting gaskets, and I probably already did a share of it. I would have just this, and now it's just gone. It's just gone. And Natasha was away for 5 days. Just went to Montana, visit a friend she'd met down in Florida up there, and she'd been actually gone for 3-4 hours of the first night, and I just thought, this kind of sucks. This is like, and then I realized this is how you spent your entire life, man. This is your entire life, like this, and I realized I got nobody to talk to, and I ended up. This was right, and she left. Was it the day before? I think she left Thursday before the Saturday of Apollo 11. So I had one day where I was busy, and then I said, all right, I'm done with Apollo 11, and it's been nothing but round-the-clock work for me on what we saw. So I'm just going to spend the weekend, and I'm going to just sleep. I need some sleep, and I'm going to play video games, just going to relax. And I found myself, the first night she was gone, I stayed up till 3 in the morning. The second night she was gone, I stayed up till 5 in the morning. And I was doing nothing but looking at like YouTube videos, and I'm reading, and I'm falling asleep, and it's like, Bill, go to bed, man. And it's like, oh, I want to watch this. It was just pathetic. I didn't go out for any food or anything. I ordered out, and then I ate everything in the house because I didn't feel like going to the grocery store, so I just worked my way down. A couple things of ice cream that were in there, not anymore. A couple of the Snickers ice cream bars, which are unbelievably, shockingly delicious, I have to tell you. Really, don't ever go near them though. They're just filled with nicotine. They're fantastic. Ate 5 of those in an hour, something like that, and just completely wasted my time. Slept all day, miserable. So I'm very glad she's back. I picked her up a couple days ago. I had made a commitment to go down and have dinner with Buzz Aldrin, but he was getting an award at the Nixon Library. And I remember just so clearly thinking, I don't want to go to Buzz Aldrin. I want to pick up my wife at the airport. And I've had enough astronauts for a while. And that's really what I wanted to do. I just canceled with regrets and thanks, and that's that. So, George says he still have one of those in the freezer. George, I don't believe you, because if you've ever had one, there's no way you have one in the freezer, because those damn things are just inject them directly into my arm. Oh, I remember the one thing I was going to talk about, and I'm just going to toss it out there because I'm done. I'm going home. It takes me usually 20 minutes to upload and finish putting things away up here. But, I can't believe I let this go, so we'll talk about this next week. We are now into several different back and forths with emails, and it looks like there's a very good chance that we're going to be able to do like a Bill Whittle Stratosphere, what we saw Apollo cruise. That we'll be able to do a cruise, and that would be our Straticon, and we're gonna put out a couple of questionnaires and stuff downstream and see what would the best departure city be and stuff and where we'd like to go. But 3 or 4 days would be great, and I don't mean to single him out personally in any way. I just think he's probably a good example. I don't know anything about him personally, but just as an example, I don't get the feeling that Dennis Prager hangs with the audience. I get the feeling if Dennis Prager's on a cruise, Dennis Prager shows up for his events, does them as magnificently as he usually does, takes a couple questions, and then Dennis Prager's gone. But if we were to do a cruise, man, I'm there just 24/7. And we started working out some of the details, started thinking about it, and we said we could run one episode of the Apollo thing once every day for 4 days, do questions and answers on that. We could do astronomy outside on the deck if they turn off some of the lights, because it's and people are saying, any idea where we're going or departure? We don't have a date, we don't have a departure, we don't have a destination. But we did definitely say we are not only interested, we're very interested. And, I think the small end on these things, I didn't know anything about it. But for it to be cost effective, it's going to need, I think the smallest in terms of, passengers is probably 300 people, 300 passengers. Much less than that, and it starts to not make too much sense economically. But I think we could get 300 people. I really do. And I wanted to try and get it done in the fall, and Shelley had the common sense to say, if you do that, Bill, the people will not have enough time to plan there, and they're just going to be disappointed. And so the guy who we're talking to about organizing the cruise said that there's a window in like March, April. We're going to be at Julius's wedding, obviously, so we can't do it then. But she said, give people enough time to plan for it. But once she said that, I said, well, then if this first one works, I am. We'll do 2 a year. I mean, why not? What's the downside here? I mean, we need enough people to justify me taking the 4 days off of work, and I have to fly there. So basically, what happens is the cruise company charges a certain amount for the cruise, which would be what you would pay for the cruise if you were just going on the cruise, and then they add something on top of that for the host. And the numbers they were batting around were $600 for the cruise plus $150 for the host or something like that. But even if I'm not out of pocket. It's not like I'm buying the rooms. So if we were to do 2 a year, what's the worst case scenario? 3 people show up, and I'm stuck on a cruise ship for 3 days, talking to interesting people. It's done. It's a done deal. So we will start doing some general surveys and poking around trying to figure out what was best. Sorry, my eyesight's not what it used to be. Oyenine says, stream from the ship. Do Bill it live in front of an audience? We will. We'll call in. We'll get Stephen Grief to come in. If we do the cruise, I don't really want to do the cruise without Scott Ott and his wife, and also Shelley. So I think it'd be a 5-person event for us. And so Scott and I could do Bill Whittle lives, record them, stream them out afterwards in front of an audience. But frankly, the reason I bring up Prager is not to isolate Prager. I just know there are some people that do what they do, and they fulfill their obligations, needless to say. But I get the feeling that not everybody really just enjoys hanging out the way I do. I'm sure there are other people that do that, but I just really, really, I will be there when I'm not sleeping. I'll be out there and ready to talk about anything. KJ Drag 1 has a big close. We're going to call it Billigan's Island. Sure, why not? Alrighty then. Hey, look at that. 2.5 hours of top-level programming. Brought to you by the paying members at BillWhittle.com, who we never, ever, ever, certainly never try to, we try to thank every chance we get. People are keeping the lights on, and we certainly could use more of you. So we'll talk about that some more downstream too. I guess with that, we'll call it a night. A fun show, a lot of fun, great night, and I will see you guys next Thursday, and we'll take it from there. All right, thanks for joining us. Have a great evening, and you guys be careful out there. Yeah, they actually bought the line about the ship. They did. People were saying, "Oh, when can we go?" They thought I was serious. Huh? I mean, yeah. What do you expect, really? I mean, you gotta look at where these people are coming from and the kind of people they believe anything. I could have told them I was going to do the show from, we were going to do a cruise to, Andromeda Galaxy. Oh, how could I sign up? I don't know. Maybe it was a cruel joke to play, but on the other hand, I like cruel jokes, so there you go. But yeah, I got the transcript right here for you. You can see it if you want. You wouldn't believe it how dense these people are. Yeah. We'll see.